sanitarium in... Yes, right. All right. Jeff, you want to start on your side?
Sure. Appeal for a church school. A portion of an appeal for a church school to serve the sanitarium, Deer Park, California Church. Monday, no you don't, but
that's good.
Okay. Monday morning, July 14th, 1902. I promised that I would speak this morning in regard to the necessity of withdrawing our children from public schools and of providing suitable places where they can be educated aright. I have felt surprised at the apparently indifferent attitude of some, notwithstanding the oft-repeat warning given that parents must provide for their families, not merely with reference to their present interest, but especially with reference to their future eternal interest. The characters that we form in life are to decide our destiny. If we choose, we may live a life that measures with the life of God. Every Christian family is a church in itself. The members of the family are to be Christ-like in every action. The father is to sustain so close a relationship to God that he realizes his duty to make provision for the members of his family to receive an education and training that will fit them for the future in mortal life. His children are to be taught the principles of heaven. He is the priest of the household, accountable to God for the influence that he exerts over every member of his family. He is to place his family under the most favorable circumstances possible so that they shall not be tempted to conform to the habits and customs, the evil practice and lack principles that they would find in the world. Upon fathers and mothers devolves a responsibility of giving a Christian education to the children entrusted to them. They are never to neglect their children. In no case are they to let any line of business to so absorb mind and time and talent that their children, who should be led in harmony with God, are allowed to drift until they are separated far from him. They are not to allow their children to slip out of their grasp into the hands of unbelievers. They are to do all in their power to keep them from imbibing the spirit of the world. They are to train them to become helpers together with God. They are God's human hand fitting themselves and their children for an endless life in a heavenly home. The education of our children begins in the home. The mother is their first teacher. When they become old enough to attend school, shall we permit them to enter public schools? Public school or church school? Many years ago in Oakland, my husband and I conversed with a public school teacher in regard to public schools in the city. He said to us, if parents knew the iniquity that is in our certain knowledge practiced in these schools, there would be a fervor raised in regard to these schools such as neither you or I can imagine. The young people are rotten, and what kind of homes they have is more than our teachers can tell. This statement was made over 20 years ago. Have the conditions in our public schools improved since that time? Some fathers and mothers are so indifferent, so careless, that they think it makes no difference whether their children attend a school, church school or a public school. We are in the world, they say, and we cannot get out of it. But parents, we can get a good way out of the world if we choose to do so. We can avoid seeing many of the evils that are multiplying so fast in these last days. We can avoid hearing about much wickedness and crime that exist. Everything that can be done should be done to place ourselves and our children where we shall not see the iniquity that is practiced in the world. We should carefully guard the sight of our eyes and the hearing of our ears so that these awful things shall not enter our minds. When the daily newspaper comes into the house, I feel as if I want to hide it. that the ridiculous, sensational things in it may not be seen. It seems as if the enemy is at the foundation of the publishing of many of these things that appear in newspapers. Every sinful thing that can be found is uncovered and laid bare before the world. The line of demarcation between those who serve God and those who serve Him not is ever to remain distinct. The difference between believers and unbelievers should be as great as the difference between light and darkness. When God's people take the position that they are the temple of the Holy Ghost, Christ Himself abiding within, they will so clearly reveal Him in spirit, word, and action that there will be an unmistakable distinction between them and Satan's followers.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
There's a lot here on our children, but a lot based on our homes. You know, how do we represent? Are we, those last couple of paragraphs particularly, is there a difference between me and a non-believer? Is there a difference in me and the world? Or am I so acclimated to the world around me that I become a part of it? And that's interesting. You know, the difference between believer and unbeliever should be as great as the difference between light and dark. That says a lot. Do people...
But that's what our kids are doing now, is they want to fit in with the world. They don't want to be different.
That's
and
right.
that's the issue. And that's why weekly we come in here and pray for our children and grandchildren.
Yep.
Because they just want to be like the world.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world."
That's right. It is not of this
It's
world.
not. Who is it?
You're right. Okay. There's only two. Robert?
My father became a Sabbath-keeping Christian when I was maybe 3 years old. When I was 7, he moved us 1,000 miles from western Oklahoma to middle Tennessee for Christian education.
Mm.
We moved from a farm that we got the house provided and a cow and chickens, so the living, he had to work hard 6 days a week, but we had amenities there.
Yeah.
We moved into a one-bedroom apartment because that was all that was available on Madison campus, and he made 75 cents an hour. But I went to school there for 12 years.
And everything they had came in the trunk of a car.
No, it came in a little trailer
Whatever you
behind
could
the car.
have.
Yeah.
That was it.
But I've always known that he gave up his education and ability to make more money to get me educated. It cost him the rest of his life because he worked without a degree or an advanced degree.
Right.
But he worked for the hospital, for the Southern Pub, and he always knew he was working for the Lord.
Right. Right. Very true.
So that conveyed on to me of how important Christian education is.
Very true. But it's hard for people to see that today.
Comes at a sacrifice
Yep.
often.
It is very hard for people to see that today. Michael?
So two different points of view, but kind of the same thing as what she's saying here. I know, having children recently getting out of academy, that there is a thing that if a child doesn't do well in academy that's an Adventist family, that they'll move that child to another Adventist academy. And the next academy will accept them and try to help them get back in line with whatever reason caused them to move. But the families are committed to keeping them in Adventist schools. At the same time, too, we've got about half and half here at this school.
Right.
I continuously get comments from the parents of non-Adventist children at what a blessing our school is here and how they know they have to pull their kids away from the public school system. They know they have to go somewhere, and what a blessing it is that they found our school and how blessed they feel their children are. So even though they're not Adventist families, they recognize the need for Christian education. So both groups realize it, different circumstances, but both groups.
Can I
We get a
still have my
lot of
car
good
door open?
comments.
I mean, the garage door? Okay.
Thank you, Deb.
We
I just wondered.
get a lot of comments from
Thought I had.
our non-Adventist parents of how appreciative they are that their children can
Sure.
come to our school.
All right, very good, very good. If only the Adventist parents could realize how much
I didn't
it-
say anything.
I'm just saying. There are many, not necessarily in our church, but there are many that don't think twice about the Adventist school versus public school. I mean, and it goes along with the world. I mean, that's just the way it is. All right, so can others see a difference in me? Is the question that we all need to ask ourselves. Doria?
Educating children in Bible principles. Some of God's people permit their children to attend the public schools where they mingle with those who are corrupt in morals. In these schools, their children can neither study the Bible nor learn its principles. Christian parents, you must make provision for your children to be educated in Bible principles, and do not rest satisfied merely with having them study the Word in the church school. Teach the Scriptures to your children yourselves when you sit down, when you go out, when you come in, and when you walk by the way. Walk with your children much oftener than you do. Talk with them. Set their minds running in a right channel. As you do this, you will find that the light and the glory of God will come into your homes. But how can you expect His blessing when you do not teach your children aright? I am merely touching upon a few points on a number of subjects relating to the training and education of children. Sometime I hope to treat upon these points more fully, for I have been thoroughly aroused to realize that these matters must be presented before our people. Seventh-day Adventists must move in a way altogether different from the way in which they have been moving if they expect the approval of God to rest upon them in their homes. Every faithful parent will hear from the lips of the Master the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord." May the Lord help us to be good and faithful servants in our dealings with one another. He tells us to consider one another, to provoke unto love and to good works, helping and strengthening one another.
So true. And if your kids aren't in an Adventist school, then there's a greater burden on the parents then to educate them in the biblical principles and the Christian way and so forth. But many times that falls by the way just the same, which doesn't give them anything to lean on. Michael?
Church school needed at Crystal Springs. We are almost home. We are standing on the borders of the eternal world. Those who prove worthy will soon be introduced into the kingdom of God. We have no time to lose. We should establish the work in right lines here at Crystal Springs. Here are our children. Shall we allow them to be contaminated by the world, by its iniquity, its disregard of God's commandments? I ask those who are planning to send their children to the public school where they are liable to be contaminated. How can you take such a risk? We desire to erect a church school building for our children. Because of the many calls made for means, it seems a difficult matter to secure sufficient money or to arouse an interest great enough to build a small, convenient schoolhouse. I have told the school committee that I will lease to them some land for as long a time as they care to use it for school purposes. I hope that interest enough will be aroused to enable us to erect a building where our children can be taught in the Word of God, which is the lifeblood and flesh of the Son of God. Will you not take an interest in this erection of this school building in which the Word of God is to be taught? We expect to have a school building in which the Bible can be taught, in which prayers can be offered to God, in which the children can be instructed in Bible principles. We expect that everyone who can take hold with us will want to have a share in erecting this building. We expect to train a little army of workers on this hillside. There is no reason why this matter should drag. Let everyone take hold to help, persevering and with unflagging interest until the building is completed. Let everyone do something. Some may have to get up as early as 4 in the morning in order to help. Brothers and sisters, what will you do to help build a church school? We believe that everyone will regard it as a privilege and a blessing to have this school building. Let us catch the spirit of the work, saying, we will arise and build. If all will take hold of the work unitedly, we shall soon have a schoolhouse in which from the day to day our children will be taught in a way of the Lord. As we do our best, the blessings of God will rest upon us. Shall we not arise and build? Manuscript 100, 1902.
Do you think Ellen White was behind the concept of a building, a school? I'm giving you this land, making it available to put it on. You know,
And I would just add to that, going back to the last section, she said 20 years before, so she's talking about how perverse the public schools were in 1880.
Right.
If she were alive today, she'd be mortified at what we're seeing
Exactly
with our public schools today.
Roger.
In the Old Testament, with the school of the prophets, was that just for the children of Levites who were going into the temple service, or was that open to all Israelites?
It was designed mostly for the Levites to grow into a knowledge of the service to the Lord.
I was thinking how much has changed in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
In Ellen White's day, education was considered mostly optional. Today, education is mandatory. In my lifetime, our society has gone from a one-income family to a two-income family. And today, the home has pretty much released the education of their children to the school,
Mm-hmm.
spiritually and socially.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's different. When we look at our schools, I remember my oldest daughter was wanting to go to a state college. And I told her, if you go to a Christian Adventist college, I'll pay your tuition. She says, but why? What am I going to get there that I can't get at a state school? I said, it's up to you. If you don't care about values, you're going to find hypocrisy on a Christian school, and violation and perversion and everything else. But if you're seeking truth, you're not going to find that easily in a state school.
Right, right.
So it has to come down to, why am I going? Am I going for shelter protection? No, you won't find it today in our colleges.
Very true.
But if you're going to seek truth, it is available.
More readily available, specifically. Very true. But times are different, that's for sure. Very different. I know a friend of yours, Dave Ramsey, says, don't pay the expenses of sending them off to school. He's speaking largely of Ivy Leagues, but it becomes that way with Adventist education as well. It's not a cheap ticket. And send them to the community college, let them get an education on the state, so to speak. But there's more to it than just the education, which makes it worth the effort to put into to make sure the kids get what they need to do. And so, it's a different world we live in, and you will find what you're looking for, even in an Adventist school. If that's not what you're there for, you'll find the wrong things. But at the same time, the influences of the general population make up the difference. And so it can be a positive experience and should be. All right, Roger, you want to keep reading in? Chapter 24, having to do with age.
Report of a meeting at the Sanitarium, California Church School Board held at Elms Haven Sanitarium, July 14, 1904. Sister White spoke for a time as follows. For years, much instruction has been given me in regard to the importance of maintaining firm discipline in the home. I have tried to write out this instruction and to give it to others. In one of the forthcoming volumes of my writings, which is Book Education, will be published considering considerable additional matter on the training of children. Those who assume the responsibilities of parenthood should first consider whether they will be able to surround their children with proper influences. The home is both a family church and a family school. The atmosphere of the home should be so spiritual that all the members of the family, parents and children, will be blessed and strengthened by their association with one another. Heavenly influences are educational, and those who are surrounded by such influences are being prepared for entrance into the school above. Mothers should be able to instruct their little ones wisely during the early years of childhood. If every mother were capable of doing this and would take time to teach her children the lessons they should learn in early life, then all children could be kept in the home school until they are 8 or 9 or 10 years old. But many who enter the marriage relation fail of realizing all the sacred responsibilities that motherhood brings. Many are sadly lacking in disciplinary power. In many homes, there is but little discipline, and the children are allowed to do as they please. They had a problem then too. Such
No
children drift hither and thither, and there's nobody in the home capable of guiding them aright. Nobody with wise tact can teach them how to help father and mother. Nobody can properly lay the foundation that should underlie their future education. Children who are surrounded by these unfortunate conditions are indeed to be pitied. If not afforded an opportunity for proper training outside the home, they are debarred from many privileges that by right every child should enjoy. This is the light that has been presented to me. Those who are unable to train their children aright should never have assumed the responsibility of parents, but because of their mistaken judgment, shall we make an effort to help these little ones to form right characters? God desires us to deal with these problems sensibly.
All right. So if everything was like it should be, children would get a great amount of education in home. But in today's society, particularly now, we've gone to 2 workers, which means there's nobody left at home to bring them up in the right direction. So there's not any guidance. Yes?
And the kids today are growing up in this audio-visual environment. And I think we have not fully realized the damage of all the gadgets electronically, and it fills the gap of parenthood, but it's
But what are you
bad
filling that
outcome.
gap with? Exactly right. Yeah, very, very true. And so often they are given electronics before they can speak or walk or whatever. I mean, from day one, there's something sitting in front of them to keep their attention because it's easier to deal with it.
They use it like a babysitter.
Right, exactly right. Like a babysitter. Very, very true. And so it's interesting, you know, yes, in an ideal situation, the way it should be, things could be a lot different. But it then falls upon others to help take up the slack. And that's where she's coming from now, dealing with school and at what age should this be appropriate. And the less they get at home, the earlier the age would be for schooling. And that's what it's going to point out.
So my favorite teacher growing up was my third grade teacher. And I was an Adventist, so I went to public school. But I would go back and visit her in college. And Mrs. Berry has passed on now. But Mrs. Berry said, when I was in school in the mid-'70s, that if she had 30 kids in her class, there might be one that had a single parent or a family that was split.
Right.
And I would go back in college in the late 80s, early 90s, and she'd say, now I have 2 or 3 that have parents,
Right.
and everybody else is a single parent or split parents, or it's a dad and a girlfriend, or a mom and a boyfriend. And she said, it has switched from my role, and this is public school, but it has switched my role of teaching education to also being the constant and being the disciplinarian for a family. And she said, you don't realize how much it takes away from your teaching ability.
Sure.
When you're having to do all this other.
Very
and this
true.
is coming from a public school teacher in the late 80s.
Right.
And Mrs. White's writing about early 1900s.
Exactly. Not a whole lot changes along the journey. All right. I'll start on this end and read this direction.
Church schools to be connected with sanitariums. In all the sanitariums, the standard is to be kept high. With these institutions should be connected as physicians, managers, and helpers, only those who keep their households in order. The conduct of the children has an influence that tells upon all who come to these sanitariums. Excuse me. God desires that this influence shall be reformatory, and this can be, but care is required. The father and mother must give special attention to the training of each child, but you know how the families are up on this hillside. The patients understand how it is. The way it is presented to me is that it is a shame that there is not the influence over the young children that there should be. Every one of them should be employed in doing something that is useful. They have been told what to do. If the father cannot be with them, the mother should be instructed how to teach them. But since I have been here, the light has been given me that the very best thing that can be done is to have a school. I had no thought that the very little ones would be embraced in the school, not the very little ones, but it would be best to have this school for those who can be instructed and have the restraining influence upon them which a school teacher should exert. We have a school here because the Word of God could not be taught in the other public school. Our brother Anthony, that teaches that school, is fully capable of carrying a school with teaching the Word. He is fully capable of doing that. He has his position. They have hired him, and as long as they let him stay undisturbed, he had better stay there.
That's a good influence for the others. Very true. All right. So, again, her influence is the school becomes a necessity because of the family issues or lack of family issues. All right. Kelly?
School privileges for younger children. But here is a work that must be done for the families and for the children that are as old as 7 years and 8 years and 9 years. We should have a lower department, that is a second department, where these children could be instructed. They will learn in school that which they frequently do not learn out of school, except by association. Now it seems that the question is about these children going to school. I want to know from the parents, every one of them, who it is that feels perfectly satisfied with their children as they are, without sending them to a school that has Bible lessons, has order, has discipline, and is trying to find something for them to do to occupy their time. I do not think that is anyone. If they come to understand it, who will have objections? The setting of the early council. But when I heard that what the objections were, that the children could not go to school till they were 10 years old, I wanted to tell you that there is not a Sabbath-keeping school when the light was given to them that the children should not attend school until they were old enough to be instructed. They should be taught at home to know what proper manners were when they went to school and not be led astray. The wickedness carried on in the common schools is almost beyond conception. That is how it is, and my mind has been greatly stirred in regard to the idea why Sister White has said so-and-so, and Sister White has said so-and-so, and therefore we're going right up to it. God wants us all to have common sense, and He wants us to reason from common sense. Circumstances alter conditions. Circumstances change the relation of things.
All right. Interesting. They were looking at starting kids in school, formal education, at 10 years old. And so they're quoting Mrs. White to say the kids should be brought up in the home, and which is good, and start school then at age 10. And she's saying, but there are issues now that may be necessary for kids 7, 8, and 9, beforehand. This is early 1900s, and I don't know when in the public school system it was established that kids would start school at 7 years old. When I was starting school, you could not start if you were not 7 years old. That was the rule, which is right where she's stating this back as early as 1900s, early 1900s. And so, that was followed. In today's world, though, formal education starts at 2 or 3, again, because the kids have nothing at home to rely on. The parents are all working, or if there are 2 parents, but anyway. And so, as this last paragraph said, God wants us all to have common sense. Now, I know people that don't have any, but anyway, it's not God's wishes. And He wants us to reason from that common sense. Circumstances alter conditions, and circumstances change the relation of things. And so she's saying we can't have a steadfast rule all the time. There are times when circumstances change. Now, in making this quotation, don't carry it so far that you can do away with some of God's statutes, commandments, and dictates. Circumstances aren't always considered. I got to make a living for my family. I have to work on Sabbath. That's not a circumstance that is relative to the issue. But we need to use common sense sometimes and recognize what is necessary to adapt to and make change for. Anyway, all right. Bob.
Wrong glasses tonight. She's gonna be...
What an excuse. Yes,
So
Michael.
just
I'm looking for them, by the way.
So-
Case like this somewhere, if anyone's another.
So
Yes.
I know both my parents went to rural schools,
Mm-hmm.
and I think my dad was 7 when they built a public school in Tennessee where he's at. And I remember him telling me that at 5, 6, and 7, you got up every morning and you went with the parents into the field on the farm. You were cutting down trees and sharpening axes, and there were things you were learning.
Mhm.
But by the time he got to school for the rural schools, I remember the teacher got to interview the child and determine whether or not the child was ready. And my understanding was for those children, they did everything in their possible ability to be able to go to school.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because I remember seeing my dad. One of the reasons for missing attendance was farm work,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it was a privilege at their age to get to go to school
To get out of it.
and not have to do the farm work.
Right.
So it was a different attitude.
On
At
the
one
kids'
time,
side.
even on the kids' side, I want to go to school.
Right.
So.
All right. Very good. Yes, Barbara.
A church school versus poor home management. Here is a sanitarium, and that sanitarium must carry the highest possible influence inside and out. Then, if they see children who come there sharp-eyed, lynx-eyed, wandering about with nothing to do, getting into mischief, and all these things, It is painful to the senses of those that want to keep the reputation of the school. Therefore, I, from the light that God has given me, declaring that if there is a family that has not the capabilities of educating, nor discipline and government over their children, requiring obedience, the very best thing is to put them in some place where they will obey. Put them in some place where they will be required to obey, because obedience is better than sacrifice. Good behavior is to be carried out in every family. We are educating God's little ones in our homes. Now, what kind of an education are we giving them? Our words, are they loose and careless and slack? Is there an overbearing disposition? Is there scolding and fretting because parents have not the powers to manage? The Lord wants us to take all things into consideration. Every parent has on his hands a sum to prove. How are my children? Where are they? Are they coming up for God or for the devil? All these things are to be considered. The book that is coming out will have much to say in regard to the great principles that are to be carried out in training the children. From the very baby in arms, the enemy will work right through those children unless they are disciplined. Someone disciplines them. If the mother or the father does not do it, the devil does. That is how it is. He has the control. I shall not say so much now because I want to understand just what I should speak on. I want the objections brought forth why children should not have an education.
All right, she's at a meeting and having a discussion relative to the school and age and so forth. That's what she's saying. We need to deal with the issue. Roger?
I want to share a brief experience. It was 1974. I graduated 12 years earlier. 9 years earlier. I'd been teaching music in academies. I came to a point where I burned out of music. So what do? I was floundering. I lived in California, and I had to support the families. I had done temporary construction, but that didn't last too long. I said, well, I'm an educator. I'll sign up to do a substitute teaching. So I signed up with the county, and they put me on different assignments. And one day they said, we need to fill you to fill in the intermediate school for the band teacher. She's got to be gone next week. So fine, I'm at home with that. That was the hardest week of my life. I felt like I was a zookeeper without cages. I knew the subject matter, that was fine, but the control of the kids. And I find myself operating way out of my comfort zone and having to yell at them or threaten them, and that's what they were used to.
Mm-hmm.
It came Friday, and I was so glad to be done with that. I would never take that assignment again. The principal of the elementary church school called me and said, our 8th grade teacher's got to be gone next week. Could you substitute? After coming out of that experience, I'm not sure. And I said yes. The Lord was leading me through a day and night experience. I stepped into that classroom of 8th graders, and it was wonderful. They were cooperative. well-behaved, eager to learn. The discipline was easy. The cooperation was great. I wound up spending the next 10 years there. And it was just, I think the Lord wanted me to see the contrast between two different systems.
It's interesting how much you can see walking around in stores and the children and the kids interacting to recognize who's in charge here. Where's the discipline? What discipline? Kid does what they want, and the kids just say, okay, dear, just follow them around. So, very good. Thank you, Roger.
That was my very thought when we were reading that. Someone disciplines them. If the mother and father doesn't, the devil does.
Yeah.
And my mind this whole time was thinking grocery store shopping.
Yep.
It's unchristian, but so many times I've been in the grocery store and thought someone should slap that mother.
Exactly.
It's not the child's fault.
Right, exactly right.
He's never been trained, or she's never been trained.
Yeah. And just think what he's going to grow up to be.
And the devil has put the products that he desires at his eye level and within reach.
So true. So true.
The kindergarten at Battle Creek. We could do the same as we have in Battle Creek. They took me from place to place in the orphan asylum, which was Haskell Home in Battle Creek. There were their little tables. There were their little children from 5 years old and upward. They were being educated on the kindergarten plan, how to work and how to manage. They had a great pile of sand of a proper quality, and they were teaching the children how to work together, how to make Noah's Ark, how to make the animals that enter into Noah's Ark. They were all doing this kind of work. It takes something. Now I have perfect confidence in Sister Peck's teaching, but if she carries on what she has carried on, and I'm satisfied, it's just the thing that ought to be done. There would have to be an extra teacher, don't you think so? Sister Peck, I think that if we did the work in a satisfactory manner, if we have more children, we ought to have some extra help.
All right. Don't overload the teacher. That's a good plan. And if you're going to go to younger grades, younger kids, then that needs extra help as well. This is a total different style.
So Michael's teacher told him she could handle 30 when she started teaching, wasn't it what you said, Michael, in a room?
Yep.
And that was kind of typical of where we were when I started in 1960.
Right.
25 or 30 children in one room, 2 grades often.
Yeah.
And I don't remember an aide in there.
But there are limits. The education system does have
Yes,
limits.
that's right. There are limits now.
Yeah.
And it's different for younger grades versus
That's true.
the older grades.
Yep. Even in public school, you have to have aides for so many kids. Very true. We can stop right there. Everybody went around, have our prayer time together. Any other comments relative to what we've been looking at and reading so far? Yes, Roseanne.
Well, you noticed that she said discipline, not punishment.
That's right, exactly.
And the root word of that is disciple.
Yep, right. That's true. Guidance, discipling, showing the way, not punishing.
I was privileged to be able to stay home with my children for the first 3 years of their schooling. And they started in 4th grade. And I think it made a total difference, especially because I haven't had boys. And they seem to mature a little slower. But it's more a matter, it's not a matter of brain power. It's a matter of, can their nervous systems make them sit still?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sister White addressed that point.
Right. Yep. Very good. And it's interesting, if you've been on our campus, to see how the teacher in the kindergarten ages teaches the kids. It's not sitting still. They're all over the place. I mean, they're out here in the trees today. They were out here playing in the tree. And, I mean, they're just, yesterday. Today it rained. Yesterday they were out in the tree. They were collecting flowers. They had to get a certain number of flowers. So they're learning numbers and counting and so forth. I mean, it was just interesting to see what she does all the time in the kids that she's trying to learn and teach and, have them grow. Oh, she is very good with them. Yep.
Cottage industries were where most of our ancestors learned, at
Mhm.
home with their parents.
Right, right.
So you learned how to cook, you learned how to do some mechanical things. You could survive at an early age.
Mhm.
Now they got a college education, they
Still
can't
can't.
open a can of vegetables.
Right, right,
Unless they can pay for it on their phone, they don't know where food comes from.
right. That's right. Very true.
We're,
Never been on the farm.
we've dumbed down.
Yeah, exactly right. All because of electronics.
We have, and a lot of our Adventist academies can't even do work-type programs
that's right.
anymore because they're too young to work. And if you want to work in maintenance, you have to be a certain age. If you want to work at like Fletcher Park Inn, you have to be a certain age. If you're a freshman now, you can't even
There's
really
nothing
work.
you can do. All right.
There's nothing you can do because the state determines that. But I know a lot of privately funded academy age that they went through lawsuits with like the Department of Labor because they said you can't be building pallets, you can't be having an industry that's child labor. And, you know, so you've taken the ability to teach a young person how to do something
Right, right.
away from them.
Yeah.
You know, you've taken a skill they could have learned at an age
Mhm.
while they were in school and applied it later in life.
That's very true. The world we live in and the control it has on what we do. It's not getting any better. It's all going downhill. All righty. Anything you want to share for our prayer time? Things that are happening? John Rosa? Okay. Keep him in prayer. His work stuff is really challenging. No, not for a week, but anyway, last I did, he was talking about his work situation, and it's really a challenge for him, which adds to then the family and his wife and her medical issue and whatever. I mean, there's lots of things. So, yep, need to keep prayers there. Any other thoughts?
Carolyn is very thankful for the prayers. Carolyn, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
She's feeling much better and, you know, still has some issues, but she's dealing with them very well.
Right. So keep praying for Carol Lee. She's she's getting around much better, and it's good to see her around too. Also remember Mark. He's going through some treatments that are really difficult and tiring for him. They're every day, and has another probably 6 weeks to go. And anyway, so he just has a hard time right now. So keep him in prayer too.
And Debbie, she's running them everywhere.
Yes, she has to be the go for. Anyway, all right. I invite you on Zoom to get together for prayer as well, and we will kneel and have our prayer time here. Our Father,